Alright, this is Spanky Harrison here, doing a review of the new book for Dropzone Commander from Hawk Wargames. It's about 150 pages, and it comes in at a meager $23, which is pretty cool. It's full color all the way through. You can kind of see here, glossy paper. It's also really heavy for its size, which is kind of cool. But it's got a basic introduction, normal stuff. The rules aren't super complicated. A lot of it is kind of a simplified version of Epic in some superficial ways for if you're familiar with that. It talks about the stats, different kind of deployments, where you can put models, terrain. It has a few elements that are kind of unique, a little more complicated. It's got some pretty detailed rules for structures, which are pretty neat. Like infantry garrisoning in structures is kind of an important part of the game. They have the close quarter battle rules where you can send your infantry in to try and flush enemy infantry out with some pretty good examples. The commanders can do some kind of interesting things. You have like these card decks, sort of like some of the Spartan Games products, where you have special things they can do, but they're a lot more tied to your commander that you actually pay points for, and they have different stats. They have a handful of universal special rules for some of the weapons and things like that. All of them are pretty straightforward. The aircraft are another place where things get a little bit more in-depth, especially with the fast movers like jets and stuff, because they just fly right across the table in one turn and then are gone. But they're pretty similar to the way they work in Epic, honestly, from what I remember. The transport rules are actually pretty flexible, pretty powerful, not too complicated, which is important for a game that's all about moving around with your dropships and redeploying, which is really important because you play it on a 4x4 table, and a lot of the units have a movement speed in like 4 to 6 inches at tops. So those dropships are definitely really important to rapidly redeploy your troops. But you can get guys onto a dropship and then drop them off again in one movement in the same turn. So you can definitely do a lot. It has a bunch of scenarios, which are pretty cool. I haven't read a whole lot about these yet, but it's got a lot of hidden objectives, a lot of stuff where you have to send your infantry into buildings to search for objectives, which is pretty neat. As you can see, it's got a fair number of scenarios. It's also got some pretty cool pictures. They have some really nice terrain, some alternate paint schemes for a lot of different armies. Showcases their really, really nice miniatures. You get into the faction sections, has just a little bit of fluff for each faction. It kind of goes over their organization. Another cool part is it has kind of their technology, and it'll actually have little pictures where it'll point out what part of the model is actually represented by that technology, or is representing it, so you can actually tell, what the different stuff is supposed to be, which is really neat because it shows that the models were designed with a certain element of functionality in mind, which is part of the reason why I really like these guys' tanks, because they're very realistic, they're very practical. Like, if we could build a tank that worked like that today, we would do it, because it'd be awesome. And you have the UCM, which are kind of the regular humans. And this is how you build your armies. Essentially take different battle groups, and each battle group has different squads, and there's different sizes of the battle, depending on points. And every faction has a 2-page spread of alternate paint schemes, which is neat. You have the Scourge, where there's kind of the crazy parasitic brain bugs, which are kind of cool. And they have the same thing. And everybody has kind of roughly the same spread of units, but they all manage to be pretty distinct in PHR. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a pretty neat game so far from what I've read. They don't try to really do anything super complicated for the most part. I mean, the book's definitely pretty dense text-wise, but most of the rules are actually spelled out pretty effectively. And as far as the basic mechanic, I mean, it's mostly just kind of the same stuff you're familiar with from like 40K or a lot of other games. There's rolls to hit, rolls to wound. Sometimes you get a save. Well, yeah, I'm pretty excited about the game. It seems pretty neat, and looking forward to seeing where they go with it and how it does. So yeah, it's the Dropzone Commander Rulebook. You should go pick one up. It's cheap. It's a good book.